Hi. In this video, we're going to start setting up our menu. Now, we've already made a menu layer in our layer window. What we're going to do now is start adding objects that will act as buttons for this menu. Now, ideally, you'd make sprites for these, but in the interest of time, we're just going to use text objects for these buttons. So I want to start by making sure that I have the menu layer selected. I'm going to right-click anywhere in my space, insert a new object, and go to text. Now I'm going to call this one, I'll call it shop title. This is going to be the title text that lets the player know that this menu is a shop. Let's click insert, click anywhere, and then our text pops up. Now the text by default is very small and it's set to black. So we want to change that to make it more visible. I'm going to turn the size up. Maybe I'm going to go 75. You might need to stretch the window out to make it bigger. We can change our color to whatever color you want to use. And we can change the text to say shop. I'm going to do it in all caps. Now, if you want to change the font, you can do that as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to place that exactly where we want it to be when our player opens up the menu. Now, if you look at my screen, see the little dotted line rectangle on the top left corner of the layout? That represents the view of your player's screen. So when we want to center this right in the middle of the menu, we wouldn't center it in the whole layout. We would center it just within this dotted line rectangle. So I'm going to put the shop title just kind of right in the middle at the top. And because it's on the menu layer, whenever our player hits the key that we set in the last video, that'll pop up alongside the background to let the player know that the shop menu is open. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a button that the player can press to use some of the currency that they've collected and upgrade, let's say their attack damage, how much damage their attacks do. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to insert a new object. Again, I'm going to make it a text. I'm going to call this one shop button, do shop button 1. You can name these whatever you want, whatever makes sense for you. And again, I'm going to change the font. I'm going to change the size. I'm going to change the color. Go with a red on this. Now, what we're going to do for this text is we're just going to write out what the button does. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this upgrade attack damage. There we go. Now, the other thing we want to do is we want to tell the player how much it's going to cost to upgrade the attack damage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the cost right in the front. So let's say, my player collects coins as they defeat enemies. So I'm going to say it is 5 coins. Put a little dash in between. 5 coins to upgrade the attack damage. Now, to let the player know that that 5 is referring to how many coins, what I can do is I can take that HUD coin object that I made in a previous video. It's the little symbol for the coin that I used on my HUD layer to show how many coins they have. I can use that same object again, drag and drop it into my menu layer, stick it right there, so my player knows that that's referring to coins. Now, again, if I were to do this on my own, I would probably spend the time to make a sprite of a button that says like upgrade attack damage, make it look kind of cool and fancy. But for now, since we don't have the time to make a sprite, just the text will do. Now, if we try playing it, if I open up my menu, that'll pop up. It says shop, and I have the button. But our player can't click on the button yet. What we're going to do is we're going to add a mouse control into the game. So far, all of our controls have been with a keyboard, but we can add other input methods by right-clicking, going to Insert New Object, and scrolling down to the Input section. Now you'll see one called Mouse. There's also options for gamepads or touchscreens. We're going to do Mouse. Now, once we've added the mouse, that gives us a whole new set of abilities that we can use in our event sheet. If I go to Add Event, now I can find a mouse object. And with the mouse, if you double click on that, you can have things happen when you click on it or when your cursor is above an object. Let's go to On Object Clicked. And the object that we're going to click on is going to be the shop button. Now you can change which mouse button they have to use. Left is the normal kind of typical mouse button for this. You can have either click or double clicked. I would recommend clicked is good. Click done. And now we can decide what action happens when our player clicks on the button. We want to do a couple things. We want to subtract a certain amount from the coins that they've collected, and we want to add to how much damage their attacks do. So let's add action. And first, let's subtract a certain amount from their coins. I'm going to go to System because I have a global variable that keeps track of how many of these items my player has collected. So if I go down to the global variable section, I'm going to subtract from, and mine's called coin count. Yours might be something different. And I'm going to decide how many coins are we subtracting. Now in my menu, I said it costs 5 coins to upgrade your attack damage. So I'll subtract 5. Now if you play it, every time you click on that button, it'll be subtracting 5 coins. Now you might not really be able to tell because there's nothing here that shows you that anything's happening when you click on it. But if I close my menu, I'll see that I'm now down to negative 70 coins up in the top left. So it is working. But I think we should do a couple things here. One, let's put a coin count right in the shop so our player can see how much money they have while the shop menu is open. So I'm going to add that to my menu layer. Now I already have that stuff made. It's already on the HUD, right? So I can just use those same objects and just drag them onto the menu layer too. I believe the text that I used was called coins. Coin counter, here it is. Find yours. It's whatever object you have set over here for your HUD layer. This one right there. So mine's called coin counter. Drag and drop that into my menu layer. I'll put it right below the shop. And again, I would recommend putting the little HUD coin symbol there so our player knows that that's referring to the number of coins they have. Cool. Now, we shouldn't be able to go into the negatives, right? Our player should not be able to have negative 100 coins. We should make it so that if they can't afford to upgrade their attack damage, it won't let them buy it. What we have to do is add another condition to this on left button clicked. I'm going to double click over here on the left tab. I'm going to go to System. What I want to do is compare variable. I'm going to compare the variable for coin count. I'm going to say that it has to be greater or equal to the minimum price of upgrading their attack damage, which for me is 5, right? So if they have 5 or more coins, then they can click on it. If they don't have 5 or more coins, then this won't happen. So now if you try it, if we have 0 coins, nothing happens. Now to test this out, you can give yourself more coins. If you scroll up to the top, up here in the global variable, you can double click on this and set it to whatever initial value you want. So if I want to give myself 500 coins to start with, just have to change that up there. You can always change it back to 0 when you're ready to release your game. Good. Now the next thing we're going to do for this is we want to make it increase the damage that our players do when they attack. I'm going to make a global variable for this. So I'm going to right click, add global variable, and I'm going to call this attack damage. The type's going to be a number, and the initial value is going to be how much damage your player's attacks do at the beginning of the game. I would recommend 1 is probably a good place to start. What we can do is we can have this global variable control how much damage your attacks do, and we can increase it every time they click on that button. So let's add an action here. Go to System, go to Add To, and we're going to add 1 to the attack damage. Now, in order to make this actually have our players do more damage, we have to go back up to the enemy sections. Let's start with enemy 1. Let's open up that group. And I want to find the part about enemy life. You might have things organized into subgroups. If you don't, we're looking for this event right here. It should say enemy 1 on collision with either projectile or maybe an attack hitbox. Then enemy 1 subtract a certain amount from health. Yours might be set to 1 probably. What we're going to do is we're going to change this event right here, this action. So instead of subtracting 1 from the health, we're going to subtract the attack damage global variable that we just created. You can replace values with global variables. So now whenever the attack damage global variable is increased, it'll automatically do more damage when it hits enemy 1. We're going to do the same thing for enemy 2. So I'm going to open up enemy 2. I'm going to find this event right here on collision with enemy 2, subtract attack damage. You want to make sure it's the one with a little earth next to it, which means global variable. Let's do the same thing for enemy 3 as well. Great. Now let's try it out. I'm going to kill this first enemy. It takes 1, 2, 3 hits to destroy him. I'm going to open up my menu. I'm going to upgrade my attack a couple times. And now 1 hit destroys him. Perfect. It works. Now, the only thing that's kind of missing from this menu is that I feel like it doesn't really communicate to the player very well. Like, I might not necessarily know that this is something I can click on. And when I do click on it, there isn't a lot of feedback to let me know that it's working besides the fact that my money goes down. We can make it a little bit more responsive to the player. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new event. And I'm going to go to mouse, and I can select cursor is over object. What we can do is we can have whenever our mouse is over the shop button, we can make the text change color. So that way the player knows that this is something that they can click on. We're going to go to add action. We're going to go to our shop button. And I have all these different options. I can change the font size. I can change the font itself. We're going to change the font color. Now, this is the way that Construct uses color. There's this RGBEX and then 3 zeros. The zeros back here represent how much red is in the color, how much green is in the color, and how much blue is in the color. You can just kind of trial and error this stuff to figure out what kind of values you have to put in here to make the color that you want. Or if you want to, you can actually test it out. Like for example, if I click on here, you'll notice that on the color that you select, it puts those values there for you. So for example, this red I have is 195, 19, 19. So say I want to make this color white. If it's white, then that color is 255, 255, 255. I'm going to keep it red, but I'll make it turn white when my mouse is over it. So let's go back over here, add action for the shop button, set the font color, and I'm going to make it 255, 255, 255. Now when I open my menu, put my mouse over the cursor, it lights up white. The only problem is when I take my mouse away from the cursor, it stays white. So let's make another event that says when the mouse, cursor is over object, shop button, but this time we're going to invert it. So we're going to say when the mouse is not over the shop button, then we can add action, go to our shop button, set the font color, and we can decide what to set it to. Now, if you notice over here, it says 185, 1919. That's the red we used. Now, your numbers are different than mine, right? That's just the color code for my red, but you might have a totally different code there. So if you want to find out what yours is, just click on your text and you should see it there on the left. But if you try it out, the color's not perfect, right? Maybe a little bit different. You can see that this is the red I was using before, and this red's a little bit more bright. It's not a big deal, but you might notice that the color's not exactly the same. If you do want the color to be exactly the same as what you selected, you have to actually add a little bit more into this expression. If you put RGBEX and then 255 before the parentheses, it makes the color more true to whatever you've selected over here. It's just a different way of expressing color through color code, and it's honestly more complicated than it needs to be. So I wouldn't worry about that too much, but if you want the color to be more true, 255 is what you add in there. But now if you press play, open up your menu, now it's pretty obvious that this is something I can click on. Now let's do one last thing, and then we'll leave it at that. Let's make it so every time you click on it, a little message pops up that says you've upgraded your attack damage. What I'm going to do is go to my layout, and I'm going to make sure I'm on my menu, and I'm going to insert a new object. It's going to be text, and I'll call this shop attack upgrade. attack upgraded. And again, you can call it whatever you want. What I'm going to have this text say is, I'll make it say +1 attack. +1 attack damage. Just to let the player know that when they've clicked on that, that's what they've done. They've added 1 to their attack damage. I'm going to choose a color for it. Make this kind of a yellow. I'm going to choose a font. And choose a size. Maybe I'll go a little bit smaller. Good. And what we'll do is we'll just make this text, this little message pop up. Whenever they click on it, we'll make the message pop up right here. So let's just go ahead and place it where we want it to pop up right now. You can place it anywhere on your menu. Now notice the position over here, mine is 704 by 218. We'll need that in just a minute. Let's go back over to our core event sheet. What we're going to do is whenever the player has clicked on that button, subtracts 5 from the coin count, adds 1 to the attack damage, we'll add another action. Let's go to System, and let's create Object. We'll create our Shop Attack Upgraded text on the Layer menu, and then I'll put in the position here, 704x by 218y. Now, once you have that there, we probably don't want the attack damage message to be there in the beginning of the game, so I'd recommend dragging that off into the gray area outside, just so it's not there when the player opens the menu the first time. Let's try it out. Open our menu, click on it, attack damage pops up. But we probably don't want it to stay there forever, right? Let's make it fade out. It'll pop up once and then it'll slowly disappear. So let's go back over to this object and let's add a behavior to it. We'll add a fade. Now, do we want to fade in? No. It should be there as soon as they click, right? It doesn't need a fade in, but it should have a nice fade out. So I'll have it fade out, maybe 0.5, maybe 1. 1 second's probably good. Do we want it to destroy after it's finished? Sure. And enabled. Let's try that. Now notice that it's not fading out. The reason why it doesn't fade out is because if you remember, we froze time while the menu is open. So anything that has a time associated with it, like a fade, for example, won't work while the menu is open. So we have to add an exception to that. I'm going to add an action here. Right after I've created the shop attack upgraded on that layer, we can go to System. We can go down to Time, and you'll find Set Object Timescale. We're going to set the object timescale for our shop attack upgraded text to timescale 1. That way, while everything else is frozen, that won't be. If you ever have anything in your menu that you want to have an animation play or you want to have a fade happen, you can just set the timescale for that specific object to 1 while everything else is still frozen. Now that should work. Let's try it out. Good. Nice fade out. And it gives us a sense that we are actually accomplishing something when we click that button. Now, if you want to, you can get even more fancy with it. We can put a little bit of movement to it. Like, for example, maybe I'll put a bullet behavior on here. We want to uncheck set angle so it doesn't rotate. But we can say, okay, when that text is created, go to our shop attack upgraded. When it's created, we can add an action for the shop attack. And we can set its angle of motion. So we can have it kind of float upwards. Up is 270. So now every time I click the button, that's probably too fast. So let's turn down our speed. I'll make it 100 instead. Yeah, still maybe even a little too fast. Let's go 70. You can also get even more fancy with it. Make this random and have it go from, like, let's say 200 to 300. 200 comma 300. kind of floats up at random directions. Totally not necessary, but it looks kind of nice. Great. We'll leave it there today. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.